Hello model railroaders, it's Dave. Welcome to the layout. Got a new project going on today, or actually yesterday and today. I did a lot of it off camera, so to speak. We're making a sound car, and this is not the decoder out of my Model Power Mikado unit. This is actually another Tasami light steam decoder that I had picked up when a local, well, I won't call it exactly local, but a hobby shop here in southern Ontario went out of business a couple of years ago, and I was able to pick it up for a half-decent price, substantially reduced. So it was worth picking up to have a second one, and my thought has always been to generate a sound car, so finally got around to it today, now that I'm in decoder and trying to get the layout populated as far as locos go. So let's just give you a run through. So the speaker here is a 3/8 inch speaker, a Soundtraxx speaker with the enclosure, and I see I've picked up a little metal bit off the end, so we'll get rid of that. So that will go into the mounting base that I've already super glued into the bottom of the car, and I've drilled a substantial hole in the bottom of the car, as you can see, to let the sound out. I've already run the black and the red wires as suggested, where the black goes to the left-hand pickup and the red goes to the right-hand pickup. And when I flip the car over, I'll show you that. Across the motor leads, I've got a 100 ohm 1 watt resistor, but we'll be dialing the speed table down to essentially 0 so that won't really be getting any heat generated during the active sound generation when it's consisted with a steam locomotive, but it's required, from what I've read, to be able to program the sound decoder that it's looking for engine resistance. So I figured instead of going with the half watt, I had a 1 watt, so overkill maybe, but hey, if it works, it works. That's all that matters. Instead of the 220 microfarad capacitor, that electrolytic capacitor that comes with the kit, I've actually installed a 2200 microfarad capacitor, and both are rated at 25 volts. So just since I had the room, I wanted to add that up. Now at the local electronics shop, I wasn't sure because I didn't measure the car before I left, of course, but I had picked up a 4700 microfarad capacitor that if I could fit it in, I knew the length would work, but I wasn't sure about the width, and sure enough, the width will not work. So that'll end up in some other project, or maybe if I do a buddy's a sound car for a buddy or something like that that's running HO, hey, I've got a capacitor that will more than work for that. Now, I did look into a keep alive or a stay alive, and I want to build one of those in the future, but trying to get a 1 farad supercap in the recommended 2.7 volts is being a little bit difficult, so I got to do some more investigation into that before I work on a keep alive circuit that we may add to a boxcar or something like that, and then using connection fittings actually connect it to the loco. I've got some ideas on that, so we'll see how that plays out. If you see a video about it, then I was successful in working it out. Now, as per the other loco, I did take two lead weights, since they're essentially just the decoder in that. I took out the very light steel plate out of the bottom, so that's going to add some weight over the trucks. And I did actually pick up some thermal grease from the local electronics shop, and it's saying that it is aluminum oxide and zinc oxide, but there should be no heat bleed. I believe it's good up to let me just look at the box. 165 Celsius is the service temperature, and it's saying that it is bleed resistant, and the thermal conductivity is 1.8 watts per millikelvin, and the oil viscosity index is greater than 110, so we don't have to worry about that. I looked at the silicone or the thermal conductive adhesive, but my concern is actually getting it off at some later point, so I went with the grease for now, and I just added that using a stir stick, and as you can see, it's just a white paste that I applied on there, and a coating just to get that stuck down. So as I mentioned before, I did all the soldering work off camera. The heat shrink tubing, I actually use a, but hopefully it will show up, a Woodland Scenics heat gun that is for fiber mat. Again, you know, thing I love buying stuff on sale. I may not need it immediately, but I knew that type of a gun would work very well for heat shrink tubing. So even though I'm not using it on the mats, it's definitely is a fantastic heat shrink tubing shrinker. So on the bottom of the car, I used some Microtrains trucks, and I actually used Athearn wheel sets. I believe they were 36-inch wheel sets, and I'm using the Digirails. These are Digirails. I don't even know what to call them, but pickups. Thank you. Memory. Getting old. Gotta love dropping those words. Digirail pickups, wheel pickups. Now, I ended up, and this is the best one, is just bending them back, clipping the nibs off so that they actually drag on the pickup, and the wheel sets have the isolator on the one side but not the other. Now I know there is a SBS4 DCC. They actually do sell a different style of pickups in the US, and they actually pick up off the sides of the wheel sets, and you can actually do a left and a right off of the same post. But in this case, I've separated it with a red on one side and a black on the other side. So let's get all this packed in and take it over to the layout and confirm it is still working. Prior to me assembling it, the red and the black leads in. Last night I did do a trial to make sure that it was working with the capacitor that I had added, and I was getting sound out of it just jumping it over to the rails. So let's see if we can pop the speaker in to that little housing and see if it'll stay. It did stay when I test fitted it, but it's not looking like it's going to stay for me now. So I'm going to stop the camera, take care of that, and fit this inside, and we'll see you back in a second.